Well, we've got two heavy hitters here. We've got Paulo Vitor Damo da Rosa and Austin Bursavich, and they are facing off against each other. Dimir Rogues versus Gruul Adventures. They took kind of different parts of the color pie for themselves here. And as we join, as you can see, we're actually already here in game number 2, with Austin having picked up game number 1. And let's see how things are looking. Well, they're looking pretty good for Paulo at a first glance here.
Out what's happening here.
There's a Bone Crusher.
Yeah, Austin's got the ability to stomp here, get that Thieves Guild Enforcer off the battlefield. However, Paulo has put the Lurrus into his hand. So if Austin did choose to go for the stomp, Paulo next turn can simply go Lurrus into Thieves Guild Enforcer. So perhaps stomp is not a great option, but if Paulo does have another creature in his graveyard, maybe it is a good option. Can't really play the Great Henge out this turn. There's an Ox of Agonies in Austin's hand, but probably not going to be wanting to play that with 4 other cards in hand.
Right. Decent little hand here, too. Under significant pressure, though, is Austin. You can see Austin's life total's down to 11, facing down 6 power on the board already.
I think we could be looking at a race situation. I think we might see Brushfire Elemental land, cast Bone Crusher Giant, just to kind of get into Embercleave range here. Get Paulo down to 15, run out the Bone Crusher. You don't really want to be stomping anyways. And this gives you the opportunity to either cleave next turn or run out that Great Henge.
Well, Paulo says, yeah, I'm down to race. Let's do it. Attacks with both creatures immediately. And now Austin's in the position of deciding, is this going to be an Embercleave scenario where I really need to keep this Bone Crusher Giant around and I can take the hit, or do I need to trade?
Yeah, and Paulo, I mean, hard to say exactly how far ahead he is. I'm just doing this based off of what we see on the battlefield because we're not really sure what the creatures he has in his graveyard are. But it looks like he just might have nothing. So this is basically everything that he's working with, which might be good enough. So the question here is whether or not Austin Bursavich has a lethal attack. If we play a land, we're looking at a 3/3 Brushfire Elemental and a Bone Crusher Giant. If we play an Embercleave, and let's say Paulo blocks the Brushfire Elemental, the Embercleave would be put on the Brushfire, get in for 5 damage, and the, 4, 2, 6, 10 damage. So that would not be enough. And so I think the best option might be to run out the Great Henge just to gain the life. Because the ground creatures aren't really a huge problem. And so maybe just try to fill up on the following turn with the combination of the Ox plus the Great Henge. In fact, we might even see a chump block here from the Brushfire Elemental on the Thieves Guild Enforcer, given that Paulo can replay it anyways if it died.
So strange positioning here, as somehow Paulo Vitor is the one who's very much the beatdown at this point, threatening lethal against Austin's deck, which is Gruul Smash.
I wonder if Paulo's going to sack just to try to find a removal spell here.
That's exactly what he's going to do, Paul. Merfolk Windrobber goes away. Can do it again. Do you want to crack Fabled Passage first? No?
Right, that is also an option. He can cycle here. He can also just choose to play the Windrobber, which is a way to cycle for 1 mana.
He finds Negate. Still has that Merfolk Windrobber from the graveyard if he wants it.
Yeah, Negate a little bit awkward against... Right now, he's really just concerned about a string of creatures from Austin, given that the Great Henge is in place, so the Negate won't stop that. However, it will stop the Embercleave.
Right. It gives him good insurance plan from getting like, oops, I win. In the meantime, though, he can force a block of some sort here.
And I wonder if Paulo's even considering attacking with Lurrus because he has that Agonies Awakening in his hand.
Oh, don't even say it, Paul. That just gives me shivers, but
Yeah,
it's
that's
exactly
what
what's
he's going
happening.
for here.
Wow. Everything in the red zone here for Paulo Vitor.
And if I'm Austin, I mean, it's so tempting here just to get that Luris off the battlefield. So I think we're going to see Bone Crusher on the Luris and then the Elemental on the Thieves Guild Enforcer. And then we'll just, and then we're going to be playing the Ox of Agonies lottery here and seeing what riches they may bring for Austin here.
Indeed. Austin's at 5 life with really nothing on the board except for the Great Henge. So you got to start from somewhere, I suppose. So get a rebuild going.
Ox time.
It's Ox o'clock. Let's see what happens. And there it is, Ox of Agonies on the stack. That Embercleave's going to go away, but let's see what Austin can find. Great Henge, of course, is going to trigger as well, so there'll be 4 cards in hand, and it is 3 lands and a Kazandu Mammoth.
Right.
So good enough.
Well, that means that it's really unlikely for the Thieves Guild Enforcer to be able to get in there. But Paulo doesn't have a lethal attack here. I mean, Paulo's got an attack for 4 in the air.
Hey, that's a relief for Austin because look at that. Shatter Skull smashing there as well. Now, the interesting part is that Paulo is very well set up for what Austin there. 2 copies of Negate to counter the Shatter Skull smashing, for example, and then Agadim's Awakening, even if his creatures do end up in the graveyard, plus Luris there as well, is going to make life very difficult here for Austin.
Yeah, and Paulo is almost... Ooh! I was going to say he's almost certainly going to cast Awakening, but now he's almost certainly going to cast Into the Story here.
Boy, oh boy.
Oh, that was kind of a whiff.
That was Brick City. So both players really drawing a lot of lands off of their card draw spells here. Paulo clinging, though, to a significant lead. Another land off the top there.
Yeah, this is
for
tough.
Austin. He's basically on 4 lands because the smashing just gets countered by Negate anyway.
Right. So Austin doesn't really have any other play here than to just go for the smashing. So I imagine that's what he's going to try here. It's going to get hit by the Negate. And then we'll see what he chooses to attack with, because he has to be careful here. Mm-hmm. He's still only at 5 life. So if somehow Paulo just takes it all, the Thieves Guild Enforcer is representing a lethal attack in conjunction with the Soaring Thought Thief.
That's right. Scary board here for Austin. He is also in a position where he's gaining life every turn. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he might do so, especially given that he's got nothing in hand. He is gaining life every turn. And yeah, he's going to ship the turn back, Paul. Ooh, Drown.
That's 1 removal spell. So now, let's see, we go Agadim's Awakening. Does he have mana to Agadim's Awakening for 3, draw a card off the Wind Robber, and then find 2 removal spells for lethal?
Not enough. I don't. Maybe.
If he had 1 mana,
3 mana, yeah.
Right. This is still not a bad position to be in, though, because now he has a counterspell available because we know Austin's hand. If Austin draws a creature, Paulo can simply just counter it, and basically that negates whatever top deck Austin may have this turn, unless it's specifically another Ox, right? Because an Ox would be really rough, because then Austin would just be able to escape that as well. But now Paulo can go Agadim's Awakening, get back the Luris, get back the Wind Robber, sacrifice the Wind Robber, replay the Wind Robber, play a land, and still have access to Drown of the Loch.
That's a heck of a turn when you've got 2 hard counters and or removal spells in your hand as well.
Although one thing you really do have to be careful of is how much you're actually milling Austin right now. You have to be really careful, because if Austin, let's say, mills another escape card here, you've basically just given him a free spell.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, and these triggers, they just go. And there it is. Ox of Agonies into the yard, right as you said it, Paul.
So if Austin draws a creature here, wow.
And he did. He even drew another Ox.
Jeez.
He's just getting the running perfects here.
So Austin's going to play the mountain, run out an Ox. It'll get countered.
And then he can do it again.
Most likely, and then he can do it again.
I'm sure his graveyard is more than full enough to do it multiple times for cheap as well, which can really matter.
Wow. Finding 2 Oxes.
And it looks like Paulo just is going to let it resolve here.
Oh, did Austin just choose to escape the first one? Okay.
Yes, I think so.
He must have a ton of cards in his graveyard.
Yeah, I mean, these things have been out since we joined the game just a few turns in, the Thought Thief and the Enforcer. So he's probably, in fact, he actually may well be getting close to being decked here.
Right.
But for, he's also cast 2 Oxen this game and been milled a lot. Like, that goes through a lot of cards.
Right. And so he's been able to draw a lot of cards, but the important thing here for Paulo is that Austin's going to try to go for a Shatter Skull Smashing here. And Paulo now can just draw a Soaring Thought Thief and win the game here. As he's got the Wind Robber plus the Thought Thief, and he's with that Into the Story in hand. I mean, he's got a really good shot of finding a way to close this game out here.
That's right. He would end up getting in for 6 damage.
I mean, if you just take this and you untap,
the idea is that Austin's going to be able to play a Mammoth or a Lovestruck Beast post-combat.
Right, because Paulo's completely tapped out.
Right. But the Drown in the Lock can kill a blocker.
Right, and then, so it can kill a blocker, and that should just be the game.
Right.
Because he doesn't have mana to make a token. No, he can make a token with Lovestruck Beast and also escape the Ox.
Okay, so he can actually get 2 things on the battlefield doing
right, that. Which means Paulo would need 2 removal spells here to be able to win this game, or a Soaring Thought Thief.
Boy, this is about as close as they get here. Our players are both 5-1 coming into the last round of Standard for the day. Boy, he found some nice stuff there. There's a Fire Prophecy in there too for Austin, but let's see if Paulo...
There it is. Sorry,
how about easy
to draw the cards? It's just on top.
Incredible. He finds the Soaring Thought Thief immediately, and that is going to prompt a concession here from Austin Bursavich. So that means that we're going to get a game 3, and I am here for it because that was a sweet game. Super, super close between these two. And we get to run it back again.
Yeah, and that, I mean, that was just a great back and forth game. That Great Henge almost got Austin back into that, along with the power of the Ox. The Ox is just so incredibly strong in this matchup, as it's just an extremely cheap way to just completely empty out your graveyard to really prevent or try your best to kind of shut off the Drown in the Locks and the Into the Stories that the Fairies deck. Not the Fairies deck, the Rogues deck, excuse me, is packing. Reminds me of the Fairies deck.
Yeah, and Paulo's got it is playing it too. There's a lot to remind you of the Fairies deck.
That was his bread and butter deck back in the day.
It was.
He had a lot of success with Fairies.
Yeah, this Rogues deck definitely has a different vibe to it, but a lot of similarities as well.
Right. Not playing Thoughtseize and Bitter Blossom, so that's...
Is that a little different?
Or Cryptic Command.
Or
those are some pretty powerful cards, I would say.
Yeah, that standard that Fairies was in about 10 years ago was one of the most powerful standards ever. It had a huge card pool, including some of the most powerful sets. We've given it a run for its money in the last year or two, but that was definitely on the list, no doubt about it. Also, remember the mana? When you played the Vivid Lands, people played like Cryptic Command, Wrath of God, and like Cloud Thresher all in the same deck.
Oh yeah, you could just do whatever you wanted with your mana.
It was just a question of what cards would you like to play. All right, players are sideboarding up here for the decider between Austin and Paulo. This is a really great game that we came into here on game number 2, and now we get to see game number 3 between them.
I don't think I saw the Great Henge there.
I think he may have boarded them out.
He may. So this is another big thing that a lot of these top level players do. They have different game plans based on whether or not they're on the player draw. But wow, Paulo's hand is pretty incredible. Didn't want that second copy of Into the Story, but having multiple ways to cheaply interact and also having that Soaring Thought Thief.
Not too bad. There's a second copy of Blood Chief's Thirst. He'll fire off one of those on the Elemental here. Only taking one off of it feels good. And then he can play a tapped Agonies Awakening here before passing the turn back over. He would certainly like to see a land off the top of the library here to keep that flowing. In the meantime, Austin's going to add the 4/3 Giant to the board. And he missed.
And Paulo missed land drop number 3. That is huge.
That is massive here, as he's going to have to just take the 4. He won't have any good blocks, even with one of his 2 flash creatures.
I'm curious if Paulo's going to negate this.
He certainly seems tempted to do so, and he is. It's hard to, it feels like a 2-for-1 when you do that. I mean, in truth, you're behind on mana there, but right. It really does feel great. Oh boy, Lowell Mage's domination off the top is not what Paulo wanted to see in the least. But there's good news for Paulo because Austin Bursavich, well, he's got some reaction cards here. He's got Thundering Rebuke, he's got Fire Prophecy. Now, he did just find Scavenging Ooze, which can come down. But again, that's not the most potent threat. Nice one here, though. And is it worth a Drown in the Lock? You know, your Drown in the Lock's going to get a lot worse once the Scavenging Ooze is on the battlefield, especially given the fact that Paulo really just needs to find time here to find more mana.
Yeah, I think all that Drown in the Lock almost might need to be reserved for killing the Bone Crusher Giant.
Oh, sure.
Because that's putting on a lot of pressure. So I think Paulo probably wants to use the Blood Chief's Thirst here to deal with the Scavenging Ooze, and then hope to try to find a land here to use Drown in the Lock to kill the Bone Crusher Giant. Unfortunately for Paulo, Austin does have the answer here immediately for the Soaring Thought Thief in the Fire Prophecy.
That's right. So Paulo's not even going to get to untap with the Thought Thief. The Prophecy is going to take it out, and Austin, does he want to keep Thundering Rebuke in hand here? He looks like he's thinking, no, I don't, and finds a Cragcram Pathway with it. So not much to do here. Just pass the turn back, and Paulo's just like land, please.
Land. But Austin, has 2 lands in graveyard? So yes, if Paulo was able to find a land, that would have put a 3rd card. By using the Blood Chief's Thirst, that would have put a 3rd card into the graveyard.
Now, this is still a pretty decent turn here for Paulo. He gets to play Thieves Guild Enforcer and also take care of that Ooze straight away with Blood Chief's Thirst. The downside, of course, is that even though he's being able to use up his mana every turn, the thing that's breaking parity is Bone Crusher Giant. It's just been sitting there smashing him. It's the 3rd time that it's hit him for 4, and Paulo's just scrambling over an Ox. Now, he's not going to have enough cards in there just yet. Okay, there's Heartless Act. Hey.
This is the classic Screw versus Flood here.
It is, and
where you see basically a situation where, Paulo just needs to draw lands. If he draws lands in the near future, he should be fine. However, Austin does have several windows here to try to top deck something to basically just put just enough pressure to prevent Paulo from stabilizing, because Paulo's sitting at 7 right now.
Looks like Paulo may go for the Upkeep Heartless Act here. That's going to drop him to 5. Tick-tock. This is a scary situation, but I don't believe that there's near enough cards in the yard here. Oh, it is a Brushfire Elemental. And he even gave him the GG. My goodness,
Fabled Passage. Wow.
Wow, and that is, in fact, good game. Austin Bursavich is going to pick up the victory here. He's going to improve to 6-1.